Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a company that has fundamentally reshaped its identity over the last decade.
Oh, absolutely.
It's gone from a core semiconductor component supplier to, well, a hybrid trillion-dollar powerhouse.
Right.
We're talking about Broadcom Inc.
And when you look at Broadcom today, you are really observing a company that has mastered one of the most aggressive, high-stakes corporate growth strategies in modern history.
Sure.
It's a story of meticulous M&A mergers and acquisitions orchestrated to deliver, highly reliable, high-margin revenue.
And not just from hardware.
Not just from the hardware they sell, no,
Right.
but from the essential software that, runs the global digital economy.
And the scale of this achievement is just massive,
Yeah.
which immediately establishes the relevance of this deep dive for you, the learner.
It does.
The market perception has shifted so dramatically that as of 2025, right in the middle of this AI boom, Broadcom isn't just a big tech player. It has officially been elevated to the exclusive Magnificent Seven group.
Replacing Tesla, of all companies.
Yeah, replacing Tesla. That kind of market reassessment is, well, it's rare.
It really speaks volumes about where the true value lies in the infrastructure that's powering AI.
Right.
And the financial reality caught up. In December 2024, Broadcom became the 12th company ever to surpass a $1 trillion market capitalization.
$1 trillion.
And as of September 2025, it remains the most recent entrant to hit that milestone. And you have to appreciate that feat. You have to remember, this is a company that a decade ago was still focused on specialized components and was headquartered in Singapore.
Which is a huge part of the story we have to get into.
A huge part.
So our mission today is to trace this incredibly complex, decades-long journey. We need to start from its very quiet roots in 1961, through the Avago era, the intense political battles in Washington, D.C., and then that subsequent highly calculated pivot into software.
And our sources really paint a picture of a company driven by a relentless, disciplined M&A playbook.
Executed by CEO Hock Tan. And we absolutely have to understand the current business split because that is the key to this trillion-dollar valuation.
It's everything. The Broadcom Inc. of today is defined by its hybrid nature. Approximately 58% of their revenue still comes from their core semiconductor-based products, the chips we'll get into later.
Like the other side of the coin.
But a massive 42% is now derived from infrastructure software products and services. That 42% software chunk is the foundation of the high margins and, the recurring revenue that Wall Street just loves.
Okay, so let's unpack the origins and see where this disciplined approach to M&A was born. So the journey to becoming a modern big tech powerhouse, it starts, surprisingly, in the early days of Silicon Valley. What were the first footsteps of what would eventually become Broadcom?
Yeah, we have to go way back to 1961. The current corporate structure, it traces its roots to HP Associates, Hewlett-Packard, yes. It was established as their semiconductor products division. So you have to think about the legacy there. This division was steeped in the pioneering DNA of HP, focusing on components and specialized technologies. That was the incubator for its initial engineering prowess.
But the HP umbrella wouldn't hold it forever. The first major separation happens near the turn of the millennium.
Precisely. In 1999, as part of a massive corporate shakeup at HP, the semiconductor division separated to become part of the Agilent Technologies spinoff.
Right, Agilent.
So Agilent Technologies then housed this semiconductor products group for about 6 years. This was, you could say, the calm before the storm, a necessary period of independent operation before the financial engineers stepped in.
And this is where we meet the name that defines the mid-period of the company's life, of Avago. This is where private equity steps in to essentially carve out a focused, profitable entity.
And this is a critical strategic move in 2005. Two giants in private equity, KKR and Silver Lake Partners, they acquired the semiconductor products group from Agilent.
For how much?
They paid $2.6 billion for it and renamed the resulting entity Avago Technologies. And you have to understand, this transaction wasn't just a simple change of ownership.
No.
It was the start of a real operational shift. Private equity demands efficiency, focus, and, aggressive growth. And that immediately infused the company's culture. Avago was the nominal corporate entity that would survive all the future mergers.
When a company is taken over by private equity, especially KKR and Silver Lake, you expect immediate internal corporate activity, shuffling the deck to find the most profitable configuration. Did that happen right away?
It absolutely did. The goal of private equity is to optimize the portfolio for profitability and an eventual public offering.
Of course.
Avago was busy from day one, Just a few months after forming, in October 2005, they sold their I/O Solutions unit to PMC Sierra for about $42.5 million. They were already pruning the less strategic components.
And they were also adding strategically important niche technologies, right? Not just selling.
Yes, that's a great point. In 2008, they acquired Infineon Technologies' Munich-based bulk acoustic wave business for about $21.5 million.
Bulk acoustic wave.
Bulk acoustic wave, or BAW technology. It's crucial for modern RF filters used in wireless communication.
Like in our phones.
Exactly. So by acquiring that, they strengthened their position in specialized high-frequency components, a very high-margin, specialized business area.
And all this streamlining, all this optimization led directly to the company going public?
It did. Avago Technologies successfully completed its initial public offering on NASDAQ with the now famous ticker symbol AVGO on August 6, 2009. They initially aimed high, and the market clearly saw the value in this newly optimized, specialized semiconductor firm.
But at this point, they're still primarily a vendor of specialized components.
That's right. They're not yet an infrastructure behemoth.
Okay, let's talk about the acquisitions that started moving Avago away from being just specialized components toward what we recognize today, a mainstream industry power player. This is where that M&A playbook really began to crystallize.
The initial steps were foundational. In 2013, they spent about $400 million to acquire Psyoptics.
Psyoptics.
And that dramatically expanded their fiber optics portfolio. And, fiber optics are non-negotiable for high-speed data transmission in data centers and telecom networks, so that this bolstered their core physical layer dominance.
But the real inflection point in this era, the move that really changed their trajectory, was the LSI Corporation acquisition in 2013.
Oh, absolutely.
That felt like the moment Avago started playing in the major leagues.
That's absolutely true. The LSI deal was massive for the time. $6.6 billion. It fundamentally repositioned the company. Avago had been focused on components for the edges of the network.
Right.
LSI, however, was a major supplier of chips and storage technology critical for inside the data center.
For enterprise storage.
Particularly for enterprise storage and hard drive controllers. By bringing LSI in, Avago achieved two things. They gained scale, and they moved into the mainstream infrastructure market, securing a foothold in server storage.
So LSI gave them the foundation to be a data center leader, which is where the real money is made today.
Exactly. It moved them from a specialized supplier to a crucial infrastructure provider. This also helped finance the deal through strategic divestiture. The discipline we see today, buy big, keep the core, sell the rest, was really established here.
Tell us more about that streamlining post-LSI. What did they shed to make that acquisition financially efficient?
The cleanup was swift and, very purposeful. They sold off LSI's acquired solid-state drive or SSD controller business to Seagate Technology in May 2014.
Okay.
Then a few months later, in August 2014, they sold LSI's Axia networking business to Intel for a significant $650 million.
And the Axia chips were good, right?
They were good, but they didn't align perfectly with the evolving data center and connectivity focus that Avago is prioritizing. They demonstrated willingness to offload billions of dollars in assets if they didn't meet the absolute highest standards of profitability or strategic fit.
That disciplined approach, buying an entire company, paying for it partly by selling off, say, 20% of its parts, that's crucial to understanding their CEO's subsequent strategy.
It is the essence of the playbook. They are not sentimental about maintaining a sprawling product catalog. If an asset is valuable but doesn't contribute optimally to the centralized strategy of high-margin enterprise infrastructure, it is very quickly converted to cash.
So now we enter the era that gives the company its current identity. In 2015, Avago, the nominal survivor, makes an acquisition so large it takes the name of the company it bought.
This was the deal that truly defined the modern firm. On May 28, 2015, Avago announced it was buying Broadcom Corporation, the original large semiconductor vendor.
For a staggering amount.
A staggering $37 billion. That was composed of $17 billion in cash and $20 billion in Avgo shares. The sheer scale of that transaction instantly vaulted the combined entity into the absolute top tier of the global semiconductor market.
And the naming choice is fascinating. Why keep the Avo ticker, AVGO, but adopt the Broadcom name?
It was a very strategic branding move. Avago was the legal and corporate survivor, so the ticker was maintained. That ensures continuity for investors.
Right.
But the Broadcom brand carried massive weight, recognition, and frankly, reputation in mobile, networking, and consumer electronics. So the combined company became Broadcom Ltd., and the original Broadcom core ticker, BRCM, was retired.
And overnight, they were a huge company.
Overnight, they were a $77 billion market cap company with pro forma annual revenues of $15 billion.
Beyond just the revenue, what did the original Broadcom core bring to the table that was so valuable?
Intellectual property. That was the crown jewel. The original Broadcom had an enormous, deep patent portfolio across, virtually every modern technology. Mobile connectivity, data center components, and the nascent Internet of Things, or IoT.
So they became a patent powerhouse.
The combined Broadcom Ltd. Instantly became the 9th largest holder of patents among top semiconductor vendors globally. And that patent muscle is critical, not just for innovation, but for defending your market position against competitors through litigation.
And even in this massive merger, the playbook held firm, immediately shedding non-core assets to focus the balance sheet.
Exactly. In May 2016, Cypress Semiconductor acquired the legacy Broadcom Corporation's entire IoT product line.
The whole thing.
The whole thing, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee IP, and the WICD development platform for $550 million. This again showed the leadership's focus. They weren't interested in lower-margin consumer or broad developer platforms.
No, they wanted...
They wanted the high-margin, high-volume infrastructure and networking components.
Okay, so this is where the story pivots from pure M&A to geopolitical drama. Because of its Singapore headquarters, the now Broadcom Ltd. Started running straight into the wall of U.S. national security scrutiny.
Right. The first major obstacle was the proposed $5.5 billion acquisition of Brocade Communication Systems in 2016.
Brocade.
Because Broadcom was legally domiciled in Singapore at the time, this transaction was flagged and immediately delayed for an extensive review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS.
And CFIUS is the body that reviews foreign acquisitions for national security risks. How did Broadcom react to this growing resistance? I mean, they had a massive deal portfolio that they couldn't execute if they kept hitting this barrier.
They executed a brilliant, if, controversial strategic maneuver to legally circumvent future CFIUS reviews, which focused primarily on foreign entities acquiring American strategic assets.
Which they wanted to keep doing.
Which they wanted to keep doing, yes. Broadcom announced in November 2017 that they were relocating their legal address from Singapore to Delaware.
Wow.
This was a clear, calculated move to redefine themselves as a U.S. domiciled entity. It was directly tied to the name change from Broadcom Limited to the current Broadcom Inc. It was a formal declaration. We are now an American company.
And that sets the stage for the ultimate drama, the blocked hostile takeover of Qualcomm. Even after redomiciling, the U.S. government stepped in to stop what would have been the largest tech acquisition in history at the time.
This happened almost immediately after the Delaware move was announced. In late 2017, Broadcom proposed to purchase Qualcomm, one of the most critical players in mobile chip technology, for U.S. $130 billion.
$130 billion.
Qualcomm initially rejected the unsolicited offer, so Broadcom revised the hostile bid down to $117 billion.
This wasn't just corporate maneuvering. This became a global political statement. Washington, D.C. slammed the brakes on the entire deal. What was the exact security concern cited by the Trump administration when they issued that executive order to block it?
The concerns were explicit, and they focused on the future of 5G dominance. CFIUS stated that Broadcom, even with its planned U.S. redomiciling, had historically been too close to China and chipmaker Huawei. The core worry was that a massive, dead-laden acquisition of Qualcomm would force Broadcom to cut research and development spending, specifically in Qualcomm's 5G programs.
And why was that R&D cut a national security risk?
Because the U.S. government believed any resulting slowdown in 5G R&D by the American entity would create a massive competitive vacuum.
A vacuum that China would fill.
A vacuum which CFIUS specifically warned China would likely compete robustly to fill. They argued, and I'm quoting from their statement, that a shift to Chinese dominance in 5G would have substantial negative national security consequences for the United States.
Wow.
So it was less about who owned the chips today and more about preventing China from gaining a strategic technological lead in the next generation of wireless standards. They viewed Qualcomm as a strategic national asset that could not fall under the control, even indirectly, of an entity with perceived deep ties to a geopolitical rival.
So was this strictly a security issue, or was there an element of, say, economic protectionism wrapped up in that executive order?
It was a powerful confluence. I mean, while the administration focused on security, many critics at the time pointed out that the decision was also extremely consistent with maintaining trade balance objectives and ensuring the U.S. retained competitiveness in future tech.
Right.
Either way, The political message was clear. Certain high-stakes hardware M&A was off the table for Broadcom. 2 days after the executive order, Broadcom withdrew the takeover bid.
That is a fundamental turning point. You spend months trying to pull off the biggest deal in tech history, and the government just steps in and blocks you. What does a company do next?
You pivot, and you pivot hard.
The failure to secure Qualcomm was an inflection point that forced CEO Hock Tan to rethink the entire growth strategy. If you can't buy the biggest hardware company, where do you find the scale and the margins to satisfy Wall Street?
The answer was infrastructure software. The internal strategy memo must have been crystal clear. Focus on infrastructure assets that generate recurring revenue and have, much higher gross margins than commodity chips.
A completely different business model.
Completely. Broadcom had historically been a semiconductor-based company, but the failure of the Qualcomm bid directly led management to view infrastructure software acquisitions as the primary alternative path to massive scale.
And the first loud signal of this new strategy arrived in 2018 with the CA Technologies purchase. $18.9 billion. A massive move into a sector where Broadcom had almost no historical presence.
Right, and CA Technologies, formerly Computer Associates, was a heritage giant, a true behemoth.
In mainframes.
They were deeply entrenched in software for mainframe computers, the system that still run major banks, airlines, and insurance companies. But they also had significant newer cloud computing offerings.
So what Broadcom really bought was...
They bought entrenched infrastructure and a customer base that requires long-term, expensive contracts for maintenance and upgrades.
Let's dive into the financial motivation there. Why is mainframe software so much more attractive than, say, selling a Tomahawk chip?
Well, it's all about the quality of the revenue. When you sell a chip, it's a one-time transaction. Even a high-end Tomahawk switch chip, while profitable, eventually sees its price eroded by competitors, and you have to constantly innovate just to stay ahead. Software, especially mainframe and enterprise infrastructure software, offers recurring, subscription-based, or high-maintenance annuity revenue. These contracts are incredibly sticky.
Sticky.
It's extremely expensive and complex for a Fortune 500 company to rip out its core mainframe or data center management tools, meaning CA's cash flow was highly predictable and had much higher gross margins than hardware.
So they weren't just buying software, they were buying financial predictability and high profit margins.
Precisely. They were buying the stability of the enterprise customer relationship.
That appetite for infrastructure software only grew. The very next year, they doubled down on security infrastructure with Symantec Enterprise Security.
That 2019 deal for $10.7 billion in cash was a logical continuation of the strategy.
Makes sense.
After acquiring the software that runs the corporate IT infrastructure with CA, you next need the software that protects it. Symantec gave Broadcom instant dominance in enterprise security products. These products are now operated under the Symantec brand within Broadcom.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, this was strictly the business-facing side of Symantec, not the consumer antivirus products most people remember.
That's a crucial distinction. The consumer portion of Symantec was spun off and changed its name to NortonLifeLock, which is now Gen Digital. Broadcom was strictly interested in the high-margin, sticky contracts tied to corporate networks.
And the playbook continues.
And again, we see the M&A playbook in action. In January 2020, they sold Symantec's cybersecurity services division, the 300 employees doing consulting to Accenture plc.
Of course they
They
did.
keep the intellectual property and the proprietary platform software, and they shed the expensive, lower-margin service component.
This disciplined, almost surgical approach to divestiture is a hallmark. But doesn't this strategy, this constant acquisition and aggressive streamlining, which often involves deep cost-cutting in R&D and staffing at the acquired companies, doesn't it fundamentally risk destroying the acquired company's innovative culture and alienating key engineering talent?
That is the perpetual, crucial tensions surrounding the Broadcom strategy, sometimes referred to internally and externally as the Hock Tan playbook.
The Hock Tan playbook.
The company is often criticized for prioritizing short-term margin growth and integration efficiency over long-term fundamental R&D in the acquired software firms.
What do we know about what happened after those deals?
Reports suggest that after the CA and Symantec deals, There were significant product line consolidations and, importantly, price increases, especially for long-term customers. For Broadcom, the priority is extracting maximum cash flow from an already established critical infrastructure base,
Rather than nurturing innovation.
rather than nurturing bleeding-edge innovation within those acquired software divisions, yes.
Which brings us to the centerpiece of the software pivot, the deal that fundamentally cemented their hybrid identity and their trillion-dollar status. The VMware mega deal.
Announced in May 2022, this was truly breathtaking. $61 billion in cash and stock, plus the assumption of $8 billion in debt, valuing the total transaction at $69 billion upon closing.
$69 billion.
And VMware is, simply put, the king of virtualization and cloud computing software. If you run a data center or a private cloud anywhere in the world, you are running VMware software.
So by acquiring VMware, Broadcom isn't just selling chips to data centers anymore.
No.
They now own the operating system for the data center itself.
Precisely. It gives them unparalleled influence over how corporate customers build, manage, and scale their IT infrastructure. It's the ultimate sticky asset.
However, a $69 billion deal involving such a central piece of global IT infrastructure was never going to be easy to get past regulators. This required a truly global, multi-year regulatory clearance process.
Oh, the scrutiny was intense. It highlighted Broadcom's strategic importance and its growing geopolitical profile. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, investigated for potential substantial lessening of competition.
They were worried about.
They were worried about Broadcom potentially tying its hardware sales to VMware's essential software.
And the European Union also put the deal under the microscope, leading to multiple extensions.
The European Commission's investigation was rigorous, specifically focusing on whether the merger would allow Broadcom to restrict competition in the supply of certain hardware components used in servers. They forced deadline extensions multiple times past May 2023, then August 2023, and finally settling on November 2023.
A huge amount of effort to get that done.
A huge amount of time and money providing concessions and information to satisfy these concerns.
And the final hurdle was perhaps the most crucial politically, given the ghost of the Qualcomm deal, approval from China.
China's approval was the final, non-negotiable step before closing. And amid rising U.S.-China tensions, the deal was approved in November 2023, but it came with specific, crucial conditions imposed by Beijing.
What were those conditions?
These conditions required that VMware's server software must remain compatible with local Chinese hardware, and that Broadcom could not restrict Chinese customers from using its own hardware products. This is a clear measure by China to ensure market competition and prevent a potentially adverse tie-in sales situation impacting local tech ecosystems.
The deal finally closed on November 22, 2023, and the corporate changes were immediate, underscoring the importance of VMware to the new Broadcom identity.
Yes. CEO Hock Tan announced the relocation of the company's headquarters from San Jose straight to the former VMware campus in Palo Alto, California. It was a physical and symbolic merger, putting the software pillar front and center.
And true to form.
And staying true to the playbook, in February 2024, they sold the inherited end-user computing division, the desktop virtualization part, to KKR for $4 billion. Keep the core data center hypervisor, sell the client-facing lower-margin pieces.
Let's quantify this staggering growth. If we look at the financials, the M&A engine has resulted in geometric growth in both assets and personnel.
The employee count tells a dramatic story of integration. Avago had about 3,200 employees in 2009. That grew to 8,200 by the time of the first Broadcom acquisition in 2015.
Okay.
After the CA and Symantec deals, they were at 19,000 employees in 2019. Post-VMware integration in 2024, the count jumped to 37,000 employees.
It doubled in 5 years.
They doubled the size of the workforce in just 5 years, purely through integration.
And the financial statements, I imagine, reflect that massive influx of high-value assets.
The numbers are staggering. In 2024, the company reported a colossal revenue of US $51.57 billion. Operating income hit US $13.46 billion. Critically, their total assets ballooned to US $165.6 billion in 2024, largely due to VMware being consolidated onto the balance sheet.
So that's a doubling of assets from the previous year.
A doubling, yes. This confirms that the M&A strategy, for all its controversy, has been incredibly effective in delivering unprecedented growth and scale.
It's worth noting the key institutional players who hold the reins of this now trillion-dollar company.
Ownership is heavily institutional, which ensures a focus on long-term stability and index tracking. As of early 2024, the Vanguard Group is the largest shareholder at over 10%. BlackRock follows closely behind at 7.63%. Other major investment groups like Capital World Investors and State Street Corporation hold significant positions. This institutional density reflects Broadcom's role as an essential foundational stock in global technology indices.
Despite the massive pivot and all the drama of the software acquisitions, we must reiterate, Broadcom remains a global powerhouse in hardware. They are the unseen plumbing of the digital world, and their chips are everywhere.
That hardware division is the engine that drives the connection economy. Broadcom's core product offerings cover data center networking, broadband infrastructure, wireless technology, data storage, and industrial control.
I mean, their components are in data center racks, mobile phone base stations, home routers.
Factory automation systems, and thanks to that LSI acquisition, a huge portion of the world's storage systems.
And we are talking about chips used by major vendors, including Apple in their smartphones, Dell in their servers, and even small-scale computing like the Raspberry Pi boards.
Right, which use the Broadcom BCM2711 chip. They are deeply structurally embedded in the global supply chain.
They are essential.
They are, but their true dominance is in high-speed networking chips, which enable the hyperscale data centers, the Googles and Metas of the world, to operate at mind-bending speeds.
Let's focus on that networking hardware, specifically the switch chip portfolio, starting with the Jericho 2.
The Jericho 2 is a remarkable piece of engineering. It's a programmable Ethernet switch chip capable of achieving up to 10 terabits per second, 10 T-bit switching capacity per single device.
10 terabits per second.
And to put that 10 T-bits in perspective for you, the learner, that means the chip can process the equivalent of transmitting over 1,000 high-definition movies every single second. That is the fundamental speed barrier they are breaking.
But the Tomahawk series is the line that really dictates the speed limits for massive cloud networks, demonstrating a relentless, almost exponential increase in density.
The Tomahawk series is the backbone of hyperscale cloud switching. The Tomahawk 3, for example, supports high-density 400 gigabit Ethernet standards. Its top variant delivers 12.8 Tbits of total chip bandwidth.
Which means
it enables 32 ports to simultaneously run at 400 Gbits.
And the speed trajectory from there is just astounding. They are essentially doubling the capacity with each iteration.
It's an incredible pace of innovation, driven by the demands of AI and streaming video. The Tomahawk 4 achieved 25.6 Tbits. And the latest, the Tomahawk 5, reaches a maximum speed of 51.2 Tbits.
51.2.
When a chip hits 51.2 Tbits, you are talking about processing the data equivalent of transferring roughly 5,000 high-definition movies every second. These chips are non-negotiable infrastructure for the world's largest cloud builders.
This speed and capacity bring us directly to the current AI boom and the reason for that trillion-dollar valuation. The XPU custom chips. What is an XPU in the context of Broadcom, and why is it so critical?
So Broadcom uses the term XPU to describe custom application-specific integrated circuits, or ASICs, that they co-develop with major hyperscale clients specifically for high-intensity specialized AI workloads.
So this is a collaboration business.
It's a business based on collaboration, not off-the-shelf components.
The prime example of this co-development model is their long-standing relationship with Google on the Tensor Processing Unit, or TPU.
Broadcom is a critical, often uncredited, partner in the AI race because they have co-developed every single generation of Google's TPU chips.
Every generation?
Every single one. Google designs the architecture, but Broadcom translates that architecture into manufacturable silicon. Their role is comprehensive. They provide crucial proprietary technologies.
Like what?
Like the SerDes high-speed interfaces, they handle the complex ASIC design implementation, and they manage the fabrication and packaging process through third-party foundries like TSMC.
Wait, you mentioned SerDes high-speed interfaces. For the learner, can you explain what that is and why it's such a crucial proprietary technology that Broadcom brings to the table?
Absolutely. SerDes, which stands for serializer to serializer, are essentially the ultra-high-speed internal highways that allow data to flow extremely quickly between different chips or within a large system, like a TPU cluster. In AI, you have massive amounts of data constantly needing to move between processors, memory, and networking components. Broadcom's SerDes technology is considered world-class for its efficiency and speed.
So
Without robust proprietary SerDes, the sheer data flow necessary for modern AI models would be impossible. So Broadcom provides the high-speed plumbing that makes Google's architecture physically work.
That explains why the relationship is so deep and sticky. They are providing the essential foundation, and this model is clearly expanding beyond just Google, right?
It is the future growth engine. Broadcom also co-developed Meta's Training and Inference Accelerator, or MTIA, chips, which Meta rolled out in 2023.
Right.
And most recently, in 2024, they initiated a collaboration with OpenAI to co-develop a custom inference chip. This move by OpenAI is highly strategic. It's part of a broader industry-wide push to reduce the heavy reliance on NVIDIA GPUs by developing purpose-built, highly efficient silicon for specific AI tasks.
So Broadcom is positioning itself
As the ASIC engine for the AI giants.
Okay, we must now transition to the legal and security friction Broadcom has faced as it has grown. Despite their cutting-edge technology, their products have not been without significant, frankly frightening, security issues.
This is a sharp contrast to their technical dominance. In April 2017, Google's famous Project Zero security research team investigated Broadcom's system on a chip, or SO, Wi-Fi stack. The findings were genuinely alarming.
What did they find?
The code for the Wi-Fi stack lacked all basic exploit mitigations.
Explain what that means in layman's terms. What basic protections were missing?
Well, basic exploit mitigations include fundamental software defenses like stack cookies, which prevent buffer overflow attacks, and proper memory access permission protection. Essentially, the software stack was operating without the basic safety locks that almost all modern operating systems and components utilize to prevent malicious intrusion.
And what was the terrifying real-world risk stemming from that absence of basic defense?
Project Zero demonstrated that this vulnerability allowed for full device takeover by Wi-Fi proximity alone, requiring no user interaction.
No user interaction.
None. Think about the drama of that. A malicious actor sitting in a cafe could potentially hijack your phone or any affected device just by being nearby and exploiting the Wi-Fi vulnerability without you ever having to click a link or download anything. It was a catastrophic security hole that affected numerous major smartphones,
Including phones.
including devices from Apple, Samsung, and Google itself, forcing widespread, immediate patching.
Moving to corporate behavior, Broadcom has repeatedly faced massive antitrust investigations on both sides of the Atlantic regarding its business tactics.
The regulatory scrutiny has been consistent and severe. In the U.S., the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, investigated Broadcom between 2018 and 2021. The claim was that the company was engaging in anti-competitive tactics,
How so?
specifically abusing its monopoly power in certain chip markets by employing restrictive contract terms.
What exactly were the restrictive contract terms the FTC alleged?
The allegation was that Broadcom would threaten retaliation against customers deemed disloyal if they dared to buy competing components from rival chip makers. The terms allegedly included effective exclusivity arrangements, making it practically impossible for smaller competitors to gain market share, even if they had better or cheaper components.
And what was the outcome?
Broadcom eventually agreed to a settlement with the FTC in 2021.
And the European Union was running a similar investigation simultaneously.
That's right. The European Commission's investigation ran from 2019 to 2021. They ordered Broadcom to cease these allegedly anti-competitive practices, with European Competition Commissioner Margrethe Vestager stating that Broadcom's behavior could cause serious and irreversible harm to competition and innovation in the market.
And they also settled.
The company ultimately settled with the EC as well, agreeing to suspend exclusivity or quasi-exclusivity arrangements and committing not to enter into such restrictive agreements for a period of 7 years. It shows a pattern of aggressive contracting that reflects a company determined to use its market power to maintain dominance, regardless of the regulatory pushback.
Finally, let's look at the patent lawsuits. Broadcom files many, but the high-profile case against Netflix in 2020 highlights a deeper, more defensive strategy tied to protecting its old business model.
The 2020 suit against Netflix alleged multiple patent infringements related to video streaming technology. Now, Broadcom often files suits against smart TV manufacturers, and the US ITC often ruled against Broadcom in those cases. But the Netflix case was different.
Different how?
Because the underlying motive wasn't purely about patents, it was about defending a legacy cash cow.
Explain that underlying context. Why would Broadcom sue Netflix?
Because Netflix's success in driving cord cutting was directly hurting Broadcom's traditional, highly profitable customer base, the cable industry.
Of course.
Broadcom is a major supplier of set-top box chips and related components to cable and pay TV providers. So critics argued that Broadcom was effectively suing Netflix for its disruptive success.
So the loss of pay TV subscribers wasn't just a headache for the cable companies. It was a revenue threat to Broadcom's hardware division.
Exactly. And the data confirms the threat. Major U.S. pay TV providers lost nearly 5 million net video subscribers in 2019 alone. Those subscribers were moving to streaming platforms like Netflix.
And the money in set-top boxes is significant.
The cable industry generates billions of dollars in profit, approaching $20 billion annually, according to some estimates, primarily from the mandatory rental fees for those set-top boxes, which use Broadcom chips. By suing the streaming provider, Broadcom was essentially using its patent muscle defensively to slow down the erosion of the legacy cable business that provided stable hardware sales. It's a clear example of protecting the old income stream while simultaneously building the new one in software.
This has been an incredibly complex journey. When we synthesize Broadcom's story from its HP roots and the political battles over Qualcomm to the strategic pivot into software and the acceleration of AI chips, the narrative is one of unrelenting, disciplined strategy.
The synthesis is clear. Broadcom's modern dominance, its status in the Magnificent Seven, and its trillion-dollar valuation stem almost entirely from a strategic, high-stakes series of multi-billion-dollar acquisitions.
LSI, CA, Symantec.
LSI, CA Technologies, Symantec, and especially VMware. This was the master plan to transition the firm from a specialized component supplier to an essential provider of both the high-speed underlying hardware and the critical entrenched enterprise software that powers the digital infrastructure.
And here's where it gets really interesting for you, the learner. Broadcom's story demonstrates that in modern tech, sometimes the greatest growth is achieved not just by creating the next great chip, but by successfully acquiring and rigorously streamlining the entrenched infrastructure needed to run the entire digital economy.
Even if that means navigating massive regulatory hurdles and shifting the company's entire identity from hardware to hybrid.
Exactly.
And what's fascinating here is that the growth is tied to two powerful but very concentrated forces. The revenue stability from legacy software assets acquired for cash flow, and the future growth tied to highly customized XPU chips designed for a handful of massive hyperscale clients.
Google, Meta, and OpenAI.
Just a few.
This raises an important question for you to mull over and explore further. Given that Broadcom's model relies so heavily on acquiring established giants and immediately prioritizing margin and scale over nurturing fundamental R&D in those acquired companies, what potential long-term risks does reliance on such an aggressive acquisition strategy pose?
Right. I mean, if the acquired software assets eventually become technologically obsolete, or if one of those massive XPU customers decides to move fabrication or design entirely in-house, what does that mean for a company built primarily on integration and consolidation rather than singular internal innovation?